My fiancé texted me 2 days before Christmas. I don't want to be together anymore. This isn't working. That was it. No phone call, no explanation, no warning. I was sitting at my desk at work, scrolling through end-of-year reports, when my phone vibrated softly against the wood. I remember the exact second my eyes landed on his name, the way my chest tightened before I even finished reading, like my body knew before my brain caught up. I read the message once, then again, and then I replied with the calmest lie I'd ever told. I understand. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, my hands went cold, because in that moment, something very practical snapped into place inside me. Not heartbreak yet, not devastation. Calculation. I immediately canceled the proposal I had planned for Christmas morning. The ring was already bought. A solitaire oval cut with a hidden halo, sitting in a velvet box I'd hidden in the back of my desk drawer at home. It had cost me a painful chunk of my bonus, but that wasn't the real investment. The real investment was everything else. His entire family was flying in. I had paid for all of it. 5 round-trip tickets across the country, a 4-bedroom Airbnb near our apartment, catering for Christmas Eve, champagne, decorations, even a photographer I'd hired to quietly hide outside and capture the moment when I was supposed to say yes under the tree at 9 a.m. sharp. I was supposed to become his fiancé that morning. Instead, I was sitting alone in my apartment on Christmas Eve, curled into my office chair, one of those expensive ergonomic ones I'd splurged on because I worked from home too much, holding a glass of scotch that had been meant for his father. That drink was supposed to be a toast to my future in-laws. Instead, it was a toast to silence. The apartment was dark. No Christmas music, no laughter, no hymn. Just the low hum of the fridge and the steady realization that I had legally committed myself to nearly $9,000 of hospitality for a man who had ended our 3-year relationship with a text message. I wasn't sobbing, I wasn't screaming. What I felt was stranger than that. It was like watching a glass of red wine tip over in slow motion. You know the stain is coming. Panic feels useless, so your mind shifts. You stop reacting and start preparing. He had chosen to leave quietly and let me deal with the fallout. Fine. 72 hours earlier, everything had been perfect. And in less than a day, his family would be standing at my door with suitcases and smiles, expecting a Christmas that no longer existed. I met him 3 years ago in the most ordinary way. A mutual friend's birthday, a crowded bar, sticky floors, loud music. He stood beside me while we waited for drinks, made a dry comment about the bartender taking bribes, and stayed. He wasn't flashy or smooth. He was present. He listened. That alone felt rare enough to trust. Dating him felt easy, not dramatic, not chaotic. We built routines instead of sparks. Shared calendars, grocery lists, quiet Sundays that didn't need entertainment. It felt like something you could build a life on. Marriage was never a surprise topic. It lived in our conversations, casually at first, then with more certainty. He talked about when we're married, not if. He sent me ring links, screenshots, oval cuts, hidden halos. He joked about my taste being expensive, but he never told me to stop dreaming. So when I started imagining the future more concretely, it didn't feel reckless. It felt aligned. I bought the ring because I wanted to choose him out loud. Not because he hadn't shown interest, and not because I wanted to pressure him, but because the moment felt shared, mutual. Like we were both circling the same commitment from different angles. The ring was a solitaire oval cut with a hidden halo, a stock setting, just in case. It cost me an uncomfortable portion of my bonus, but it didn't feel like a sacrifice. It felt like a declaration. The proposal I planned wasn't about flipping tradition. It was about intention. Christmas morning, 9 a.m., under the tree. No crowd, no spectacle, just us. I would ask him to marry me, not as a challenge, but as an invitation. A yes we'd already been living toward. Everything else was the real surprise. His family hadn't been together for Christmas in years. Flights were expensive. Pride was involved. So I handled the logistics quietly. 5 round-trip tickets, a 4-bedroom Airbnb near our place, catering for Christmas Eve, decorations, champagne, a photographer to capture the moment, not for social media, but because I believed this would be one of those memories you return to when life gets hard. I imagined his reaction. Shock first, then that slow smile, the way he'd pull me into his chest and say yes without hesitation. What I didn't imagine was that 2 days before Christmas, while I was still confirming arrival times and answering emails, He would decide our relationship wasn't working and end it with a text. Looking back, there were cracks. Late nights, short answers, a phone turned face down more often than not, conversations about the future that ended faster than they used to. But I trusted the man I was planning to propose to, and 72 hours before everything collapsed, I still believed love, when spoken clearly, would be met with the same courage. The first signs didn't arrive as alarms. They came as inconveniences, small enough to excuse, easy enough to rationalize. He started staying later at work. Not dramatically, just late enough to push dinner plans back. Just late enough that I ate alone more often. When I asked, he brushed it off. End-of-year deadlines, staffing issues, a new project that needed extra attention. I believed him. I wanted to. His phone habits changed next. He didn't hide it outright. He just angled it away, took calls in the other room, stepped outside for quick check-ins that stretched longer than they used to. If I glanced over, he'd smile and say, "Nothing important." I told myself privacy wasn't secrecy. I noticed my name slipping out of his future tense. It used to be when we were married. Then it became if everything works out. Eventually, he stopped finishing the sentence at all. Whenever wedding talk surfaced, he didn't argue. He deflected. Jokes about timing, comments about money, vague concerns about stress. He never said no. He just never said yes with conviction. Meanwhile, I was planning quietly. Flights, catering, seating arrangements, arrival times. I built the proposal like a puzzle, slotting pieces into place while convincing myself his hesitation was just nerves. I thought love meant patience. 2 weeks before Christmas, something shifted. He stopped asking questions about the holidays, about logistics, about anything beyond his immediate day. When I mentioned his parents' flight times, he nodded without really listening. When I asked if he wanted to help pick a Christmas Eve menu, he said, "Whatever you think is fine." That should have felt generous. Instead, it felt like disengagement. The night before everything ended, nothing happened. That was the strangest part. We ate dinner, watched TV. He kissed me before bed. In the morning, he reminded me to pick up the dry cleaning. Normal, intimate, routine. By mid-afternoon the next day, I was still at the office, finalizing year-end reports, when my phone buzzed. His name. No preamble, no explanation. "I don't want to be together anymore. This isn't working. I'm going to stay at a friend's place for a while. Don't contact me." The timestamp read 2:14 p.m. I stared at the screen, waiting for the follow-up, the clarification, the apology. It never came. I called him immediately, straight to voicemail. I texted back, "Is this a joke?" and watched the read receipt appear without a reply. That silence told me more than any argument could have. There had been no fight, no ultimatum, no warning shot. Just an exit. That's when the pattern snapped into focus. The distance, the deflection, the quiet withdrawal. He hadn't been confused. He had been leaving, and he'd chosen the easiest way out, letting me absorb the emotional and logistical impact while he disappeared into someone else's spare room. I didn't chase him, not because I wasn't hurting, but because something about the timing made everything painfully clear. He had waited until I had already committed, to flights, to housing, to plans that revolved around his family, before pulling the plug. He hadn't asked what would happen to them. He hadn't offered to explain anything. He had simply stepped aside and let the consequences fall where they may. That wasn't confusion. That was avoidance. And it was the first time I understood that the man I was planning to propose to had already decided I would be the one left holding the mess. The silence after I closed the door was heavy. I stood there for a few minutes, listening to the muffled arguing in the hallway. Every now and then I heard his mother's voice, high-pitched, frantic, demanding answers, but I couldn't make out what she was saying. I wasn't listening anymore. When the noise finally faded, I took a deep breath and walked back into the apartment. Everything looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago, before the world shifted. His clothes were still hanging in the closet, his shoes still by the door, the ring still hidden in the drawer. It was all so normal, and yet everything felt so completely different. I sat down on the couch, still in my sweatpants, and stared at the empty space where his things used to be. My fingers drummed against the armrest. I wanted to feel angry, but all I felt was numbness. It wasn't the kind of numbness that you get when you're overwhelmed. It was the kind of numbness that comes with a decision made for you. A decision you didn't even know was coming, but now that it's here, it feels inevitable. I glanced at my phone. Jackson had texted me. "You're a psychopath. How could you do that to my parents?" The text made my stomach twist. There was no apology, no explanation, just anger, as if I were the one who had ruined everything. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I spent the rest of the night alone, ordering takeout and scrolling through random videos on my phone. Nothing to numb the feeling, just the gentle hum of a distraction. The weight of reality was too heavy to ignore, so I pushed it to the back of my mind for a while. It wasn't until I started packing his things that the anger really began to settle in. When I opened the door to the guest room, everything was exactly as he had left it. I could still see the outline of his body in the blankets. The book he had been reading was still open on the nightstand. His half of the closet was untouched. For a moment, I thought I might just leave everything as it was, let it stay like a shrine to the relationship we had been building. But I couldn't. I couldn't keep holding on to something that no longer existed. I started boxing his things up, not with care, but with a purpose. I wanted it all out. I wanted to move on. The way he had just left, without a word, without a plan, without considering what would happen to me, to us, it made me sick. I packed everything without looking back. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing him. It was about me reclaiming control. As I closed the last box, I realized I hadn't even thought about how this would affect his family, how it would feel for them. But I didn't care anymore. They were his problem now. I wasn't going to be the one left cleaning up after his decisions. It wasn't until later that I got the text from his sister Courtney. "You can't just act like this. You ruined Christmas. Mom is crying. Dad's pissed. You owe us." I stared at the screen, feeling my jaw tighten. Owe them? They owed me an apology. They owed me an explanation for why I was the one left standing in the mess. I had spent thousands on their trip, on a future that was supposed to include them. They couldn't even give me the decency of a goodbye. I blocked Courtney's number. I didn't need to deal with that today. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Jackson's mother. Unacceptable behavior. She went on to say that I owed them for their flights and wanted to be reimbursed for the expenses I had caused. They even wanted the ring. The ring. It wasn't even theirs. It wasn't even Jackson's. I sat there for a moment, rereading her email, and then I forwarded it to my lawyer. I wasn't going to argue with them. I wasn't going to explain anything to them. If they thought they had a case, they could take it to court. But I knew, deep down, I was done. I wasn't going to try to salvage a future that had already been ripped out from under me. I wasn't going to pretend that everything was okay. I was finally ready to let go. I didn't expect the fallout to come so quickly, but it did. The next few days passed in a blur. Christmas came and went, but I barely noticed. I wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the way I expected. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. I just felt a deep, gnawing emptiness. The first blow came through a message from Jackson's mother asking if I was willing to return the ring. The audacity of it hit me harder than the breakup itself. The ring was meant to be a gift. It wasn't hers to take. The nerve of her to assume I would just give it back without question was a shock to my system. But I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. What I needed was to get my own life back in order. I threw myself into work, into doing everything I could to get back to normal, but everything kept circling back to Jackson and the family he had pulled into this mess. The phone calls started. His father left multiple voicemails. I didn't pick up. His sister sent me more messages. I blocked her. His mother emailed again. This time she made it clear she wasn't going to just let things go. I knew what they wanted. They wanted me to bend. They wanted me to apologize. They wanted me to admit that I was the one who had caused all this trouble, that I was the one who ruined Christmas. They wanted me to take responsibility for something I hadn't done, and maybe, just maybe, they wanted me to go back to Jackson, to make everything right again. I had been here before. I had seen it all before in relationships that I'd outgrown. People assuming they could manipulate me into feeling small, making me question myself, making me feel like I was the one in the wrong. But I wasn't going to let them do that to me again. By the time Jackson reached out, I was already so fed up with the whole situation that I almost didn't respond. He texted, asking if we could talk, apologizing for the way things had ended. His message sounded so rehearsed, so empty. It was as if he was trying to do what he thought was right, not what was actually needed. I knew what he wanted. He wanted me to soften. He wanted me to forgive him, to patch things up, to go back to the way things had been before. But I couldn't. I wasn't the same woman anymore. I thought about the text for a long time. The urge to respond, to explain myself, to make him understand how much his actions had hurt me, was there, but I fought it off. He had made his decision. He had walked away. I didn't need him to validate me. I didn't need him to fix what had been broken. And then there was the moment that changed everything. The phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was his mother again. I almost didn't pick up, but something stopped me. I answered, my voice calm but firm. Hello? Hi, it's me, she said, her voice frazzled. I don't know what you're doing, but you can't just leave us hanging like this. You have to fix this. Jackson is falling apart, and now we're all caught up in this mess. You owe us. Her words hit me like a slap. The nerve of her to say I owed them, that I owed them something after everything Jackson had put me through. I don't owe you anything, I said, my voice low and steady. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask for Jackson to walk out. I didn't ask for him to involve his entire family in his mess. You want to be angry at someone? Be angry at him. He's the one who left, not me. I could hear her breathing, her frustration building on the other end. This is ridiculous, she snapped. This could all be fixed if you'd just come to your senses. I have, I said, the words coming out clearer than I expected. I'm done. The silence on the other end was deafening. She didn't know how to respond. She was used to getting what she wanted, used to controlling the situation, used to people doing what she said because they were too afraid to say no. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I'm not going to beg, I added. You want to fix this? Tell Jackson to grow up and take responsibility for his actions. Until then, I'm done. I hung up before she could say another word. The next day, the text started again. His family, Jackson too. But I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I had taken back my power. I didn't expect him to show up. Not after the way we'd ended things. After everything that had happened, I thought he'd respect my space. I thought he'd understand that I needed to be free of him and his mess. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Jackson never understood boundaries. He never understood what it meant to actually let go. It was late in the afternoon when the doorman called me. Miss, there's a man here asking for you. He says his name is Jackson. I felt a pang of frustration, but I kept my voice calm. Did he say what he wanted? He insists it's important. He's outside right now. I hesitated. I didn't want to deal with him. I didn't want him to think that showing up at my building, after everything he'd done, was going to somehow win him back. But I also knew he wasn't going to leave until he had his say. I sighed. Tell him I'm not available, I said, my tone firm. The doorman hesitated. He says it's urgent. I let out a breath. This was getting ridiculous. He was treating this like some kind of crisis that needed my attention. I was done with crises. I was done with being the one who always had to fix everything. Fine, I said, my decision made. Let him in, but make sure he doesn't come up to my door. I heard the door click shut and I paced the room, waiting for him to show up. There was no way I was going to give him the satisfaction of thinking he had any power left in this situation. He knocked about 5 minutes later, but it wasn't his usual knock. It wasn't soft or uncertain. It was forceful. Desperate. I opened the door a crack, just enough to see his face. He looked different, like someone who had been through a storm and was still trying to find his way back to dry ground. He didn't speak at first. He just stood there, staring at me, with those brown eyes that used to make me feel like I was his whole world. But now, they just looked empty. Can we talk? He asked, his voice low. No, I said firmly, not letting him cross the threshold. There's nothing left to say, Jackson. You made your choice. You walked away. This is over. He winced, as though my words had physically struck him. But I didn't care. I had spent too long tiptoeing around his feelings, trying to fix things that were never really broken on my end. I was done. You're not even going to hear me out? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I've heard everything I need to hear, I said, my voice hardening. You don't get to come back into my life whenever you feel like it. You don't get to just decide it's time to fix things when it's convenient for you. I'm not your backup plan, Jackson. His face softened for a second, and I could see the guilt behind his eyes, the shame. But it wasn't enough. It never was. Not anymore. I know I messed up, he said, taking a step forward. I know I hurt you. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I don't need your apology, I cut him off. You think showing up here after everything will fix things? You think you can waltz in and ask for forgiveness when you've already walked away without a second thought? That's not how it works. Not anymore. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. It was no longer just about him. It was about me. I was standing up for myself for the first time in a long time. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore. I wasn't going to let him walk all over my feelings because he was afraid of the consequences of his actions. I just want you to understand, he said, his voice almost pleading. I made a mistake. I didn't think it through. I was scared. I didn't know how to deal with everything, and I ran. I shook my head, not allowing myself to feel sorry for him. He didn't deserve my sympathy, not after what he'd put me through. I don't care why you did it. The truth is, you're too late, and I'm too far gone to keep looking back. I'm moving on, Jackson. It's time for you to do the same. For a moment, we just stood there, locked in a silent battle. I could see him struggling, trying to find the right words, but I wasn't going to give him the chance. I wasn't going to let him back into my life, no matter how hard he tried. I'm done, I said again, my voice steady. He didn't say anything else. He just stood there for a moment, looking at me like he was waiting for something. Waiting for me to change my mind. Waiting for me to offer him some way back in. But I didn't. I hope you find what you're looking for, I added, my voice softer, but still firm. But it won't be with me. With that, I closed the door, cutting off the final connection between us. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. The fallout didn't take long to hit. Once Jackson left, I thought things would calm down. I thought I'd finally be able to breathe, to move on. But the chaos, the manipulation, the pressure, it kept coming. A constant reminder that some people didn't know how to let go. The next day, I got an email from Jackson's mother. The subject line was unacceptable behavior. The email, full of anger and indignation, was everything I expected. She ranted about how I had humiliated Jackson, how I had broken his heart, how I'd ruined Christmas for everyone. There was no empathy for me, no recognition of how I was the one who had been blindsided. It was all about him. She said I owed them for the flights, for the dinner that never happened, for the money they had spent on the trip. I sat there, reading her words over and over, trying not to let the anger consume me. You don't owe anyone an explanation, I told myself. You don't owe anyone anything. But that didn't stop her, or them. It was a pattern I'd seen too many times in Jackson's family. This sense of entitlement, this belief that their needs and wants always came first, no matter what they did to other people. I forwarded the email to my lawyer, telling him to deal with it. I wasn't going to engage. I wasn't going to waste my time explaining myself to people who didn't care. The phone calls started soon after. Courtney, Jackson's sister, was the first to try. She sent me multiple texts, each one more frantic than the last, demanding that I explain myself. How could I just cut them off? How could I end everything so abruptly? Didn't I care about their family? I blocked her number, but she found another way to reach me, through Facebook. She left long, emotional messages accusing me of being cruel and heartless. She begged me to reconsider, to come back and fix things, to apologize to Jackson and his family. But I knew better. She didn't care about what happened to me. She was just trying to get me to bend to her will, just like Jackson had always tried to do. I refused. A few days later, Jackson sent me a message. It was the first time I had heard from him since we'd spoken face to face. His message was brief, but it cut through me like a knife. I miss you. I stared at the words for what felt like forever. Part of me wanted to respond, to ask him why he was doing this, why he was making it harder on both of us. But then I remembered how easy it had been for him to walk away, how easily he had dismissed everything we had built, how he had lied, avoided, and manipulated me into believing we were still on the same page, when all along he had already decided I wasn't worth the fight. No, I thought, I can't go back. Instead of replying, I simply deleted the message. A few days later, I got another text from Jackson, this time more direct, more desperate. I need to talk to you. Please, we can fix this. I promise. I didn't even bother to read it all. The words were a broken record, repeating the same empty promises he'd given me before. I didn't need fixing. What I needed was space. What I needed was time to heal. And I had been healing, slowly but surely, each day without him. I didn't need him in my life anymore, no matter how hard he tried to make me feel like I did. But then, in the middle of the chaos, a part of me felt an unexpected surge of guilt. Was I being too harsh? Was I throwing away something that had once meant everything to me? But then I thought about all the times I had made excuses for Jackson, all the times I had let him manipulate me into believing he was the victim, into believing that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't doing enough. I thought about how he had treated me as an afterthought, how he had never truly fought for us, for me. No, I wasn't being too harsh. I was being strong. It was hard, so hard, but I knew it was the right choice. I spent the next few days going through my things, organizing, packing up the remnants of our life together. His presence was still everywhere. The little things, notes, photos, gifts we had shared. But I knew it was time to let go. Every single piece I packed away was a symbol of the past I was leaving behind. And then came the final blow, the email from Jackson's mother, again. We expect you to reimburse us for the flights and other expenses we incurred for the trip. We also expect you to return the ring. It was a gift meant for a marriage that will never happen, and as you are no longer engaged, you have no right to keep it." I stared at the email, disbelief flooding me. She was still trying to control me, still trying to manipulate me into doing what she wanted. It's just a ring, I thought, but it's mine. It was never about the ring. It's about control. It's about them thinking they still have a say in my life. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. I was done. I didn't respond. I wouldn't engage with them anymore. The only thing left for me to do was move on. It had been a few weeks since everything had fallen apart, and I finally felt like I was starting to breathe again. I had packed up all the remnants of Jackson, his things, his promises, his lies, and sent them out of my life. His family, gone. The endless emails, texts, phone calls, they had stopped. They had realized, just like he had, that I wasn't going to play the role they wanted me to anymore. I was no longer the woman who waited, the woman who tried to fix things that were broken long before I had any say in the matter. It was early January when I ran into Jackson at the grocery store. I hadn't seen him since that last conversation, and I had no intention of seeing him again. I had been avoiding places I knew he frequented, keeping to myself, focusing on the future. But there he was, standing in front of the freezer section, looking like a shadow of the man I once knew. He was wearing a jacket I'd bought him for his birthday, the one he had worn every day for months. I paused, not wanting to make it obvious that I had seen him. But of course, he saw me. He looked up, and for a moment our eyes met. I could see the regret there, the guilt, but it didn't move me the way it once had. He smiled weakly. "Hey," he said, his voice hesitant. I nodded, not sure if I was even supposed to respond. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Should I be kind? Should I ask him how he was doing? But the truth was, I didn't care anymore. "Hey," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "How are you?" "I'm okay," he said, his eyes flickering to the cart I was pushing. "I heard you were going to Japan." I nodded again. "Yeah, I'm planning a trip. Solo trip. Just need to get away." His expression faltered. "Solo?" "Yeah," I said, looking at the steaks in my basket, then back at him. "Just me." There was a pause, and then he asked, "Are you still angry with me?" I considered the question for a moment. I wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the way I used to be. Anger had burned itself out after the breakup, after the endless back and forth with his family. But I wasn't ready to forgive him, not the way he wanted me to. What he had done was irreparable, and I had to accept that. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not angry anymore, but I'm not coming back, Jackson. I'm not going to pretend like I can forget what you did." He flinched. "I know," he said softly. "I'm sorry." The words felt empty now, like they always had. I didn't need his apologies anymore. I had learned the hard way that they didn't mean anything. "I think you should go," I said, my voice firm but calm. "I'm pretty busy with these steaks." He looked at me for a long moment, as if waiting for something, waiting for me to change my mind, to soften. But I didn't. I wasn't the same person who had begged him for answers, who had cried for him to come back. That woman was gone. He nodded and walked away, and I didn't look back. I finished shopping, paid for my things, and left the store. As I walked out into the crisp air, I felt lighter, stronger. I was finally free. Free of the past, free of him, and most importantly, free of the expectations that had been placed on me. I was learning to live for myself, to take control of my own future, and no one, no man, no family was going to take that away from me. The lesson I had learned, to never settle, to never believe that love was about sacrificing my own happiness for someone else. I had spent too long waiting for others to decide my worth, but now I knew better. I was the one in control of my story. And my story was just beginning.